go. Yeah. Hi everyone, it is I, Commander Stephanie Sterling, hosting another wonderful episode of the Jimquisition, and it is an exciting one today. It's an optimistic one, it's a positive one, because we have caught Glorbo fever along with the rest of the internet. We're going to be talking about Glorbo's exciting addition to Destiny 2 and World of Warcraft and Bad Rats. We are drinking deep on Glorbo booze, my friends. Drinking deep! Oh my god.
You realise that was a joke, right?
Huh?
That was a joke. Reddit did that to catch out AI news scraper bots.
What?
Glorbo isn't real.
No, Glorbo is Glorbo. I don't know what it is, but it's Glorbo, and I'm very excited.
Have you been getting your AI to do the script? Is this Neon?
No. Yes. No. So anyway, we're going to be talking about asset flips today and shovelware today. We weren't ever going to talk about Glorbo. No. We're going to be talking about the eShop, or as I like to call it, the eSlop.
Single-arm DDT there, don't see them very often.
Saddle up, fuckbugs. We're going dumpster humping in Garbage Gulch. I've got a trash-soaked treat in store for you. Some of the slimiest slurry the video games has to offer, and you're here to choke down every filthy drop of it. You cum dogs.
I've been flying!
We're talking about asset flips, we're talking about shovelware, we're talking about glorified scams and shameless rip-offs, the lowliest dregs that Steam has to offer. Wait, what? What? Huh? What do you mean we're not talking about Steam? That's right, my sexual apes. Today we're not talking about the worthless pond scum frothing at the underbelly of Steam's storefront. Oh no. We're talking about the Nintendo eShop. The new shitness. Truly home to con merchants, pathetic hacks, and so-called developers of borderline non-games whose insistent vulgarity insults the very concept of artistic expression. The Nintendo Switch eShop has spent the last several years truly giving Steam a run for its money in terms of letting basically any old rubbish go up for sale. In fact, due to the store's layout as a result of Nintendo's commitment to being as inefficient and poorly organised as possible, it may very well be a far worse situation, at least in terms of the negative impact such a lack of quality control can have on both end users and games of genuine quality buried under a mountain of muck. You can find headlines and frustrated forum posts about the eShop shovelware problem going back years now. Such is the long-running nature of this plague, and it is a plague, with individual game developers proving single-handedly capable of drowning the store in digital vomit just on their lonesome. I mean, take the fucking clocks, for example. The eShop is awash in digital clock apps, with one entity alone responsible for over 50 store listings. Red Deer Games is likely one piss taker masquerading as a game studio, and they've been selling and reselling a single pretend clock under various guises at ridiculous prices for about 2 years. If you browse the eShop with any regularity, you'll likely have seen some of the dozens of AAA Clock versions Red Deer has been sharting out since 2021. The base version has the sheer fucking gall to charge $9.99 for what is a less convenient clock than the one that's literally always on the Switch's home menu, and it's had DLC and multiple editions that are mostly bundles of content masquerading as new listings. It's about as close to pollution as an online store can have. Products like AAA Clock Director's Cut are named with such clearly sarcastic self-awareness. It essentially admits it knows what it's doing, and Red Dot Deer is happy to get away with selling the same literally obsolete scam for as long as possible. Unless it's not self-aware. And Red Deer thinks what it's doing isn't artistically bankrupt hackery, but is actually good. I don't know what would be worse. Ever since Steam decided, fuck it when it comes to fucking, porn games have swamped the store with sweaty enthusiasm. Now look, I love a bit of the old but most of these games are pitiful, lazy pieces of shit banking on an audience somehow not knowing that pornography is already freely available on the internet. The amount of hentai sliding block puzzle games is truly astounding. Now obviously, Nintendo draws the line at drawn porn, but that hasn't stopped masturbatory malefactor merchants plying their titified trade. In doing so, they managed to somehow be an even bigger hoodwink than they were on Steam, since they're essentially selling porn without the porn. The same lazily slapped together, barely workable game, only with its one selling point censored. Hentai sliding block puzzles with the hentai taken out. You know, the one thing it had going for it, if you didn't know certain websites exist. Hentai vs. Evil is one particularly notorious example. Oh yeah, you can put the word hentai in your title, plenty of eShop games do that. While not a block puzzle, thank Christ, it is a shabby collection of assets that's about as fun to play as it is to jerk off to, and I should know, I've tried both. That was a joke, of course. I'd never do something so shameful and embarrassing as to play it. Anyway, Hentai vs. Evil, which I've done a video about in the past, doesn't show any boobage whatsoever on the Switch version. The Steam alternative, mammaries aplenty, my friends. Mammaries aplenty. In a situation that's exactly like when Spider-Man was announced as exclusive to the PlayStation version of Marvel's Avengers, you're literally paying for less game content if you buy the Switch version of Hentai vs. Evil. And yes, it is the same. It's an identical situation. It is important. It is content. I'm not just being facetious. Because as I've learned since getting a pair of real ones, titties is content. TM. Anyway, that's how bad things are on the eShop. It's getting the same worthless wankathons as Steam, but somehow even more pointless. Taking the ass out of the asset flips. Oh, speaking of asset flips. Asset flips, that term I coined, may have become a bit less noticeable on Steam thanks to its store curation pretty much burying a lot of them these days, but there's no such curation on the eShop, and minimum viable products made of store-bought game assets loosely stapled together are rife on Switch. Wait, no, sorry, I misspoke. I don't want to be throwing false allegations out there. Store-bought game assets resold as games. There we are, that's more accurate. Pix Arts has become something of a poster child for asset flipping on Nintendo's system, with dozens of examples of skeletal software bought elsewhere and resold to unsuspecting Switch customers at a premium. We have such brown gold as Zombie Apocalypse. Because what purveyor of garbage would hold their head up and be proud if they didn't have a generically named zombie game in their piss-soaked library? Look at it. Look at it! If you found a piece of shit in the woods and took a shit on that shit, not only would you have something prettier than this, you'd have made a better video game. Horrible zombies are attacking! Yes, I can see how horrible they are. Is that a black and white stock photograph as a background? Holy fuck! There's a flight simulator that could easily be done for false advertising. Look what it says here. The most beautiful flight of your life, says the store listing. Yeah, the flight from the movie Alive was more fucking picturesque. They have more than one flight sim in disparate art styles of varying quality because, of course, Pix Arts isn't actually responsible for any of the art. Whatever asset store they got all these flight sims from must have had a sale on. Easy Flight Simulator may well deserve an award for least appealing store screenshot in history. It's at least a serious contender. There's a slot machine app, a couple hunting sims. All that's missing is the stock standard match 3 puzzle game. Oh wait, there it is. The YouTube channel Switch Stars has extensively covered the artless buffoons. They're as prominent as they are talentless. Funnily enough, they're one of those asset flippers that seem to take some sort of weird pride in their quote-unquote work. They've defended their flippery in the comments of Star Wars Shovelware's channel before, claiming there's nothing illegal or immoral about what they're doing. Yeah, Well, I ain't saying it's illegal, and there are a lot less moral things you could do. No, it's lazy, it's pathetic, it's hack-fuck bullshit, it's creatively and artistically in the fucking red, it's sad, it's shameful, it's embarrassing, it's plagiarism with permission, it's a practice for which you cannot be called a game developer. And I defy you, Pix Arts, to demonstrate where the artistry is. I don't care about the legality or the morality. I care about the artistry. What have you done that qualifies you as an artist, as a creator, as a developer, as anything other than a lowly asset flipper? Try to answer that and stay fashionable. Okay, I was just going to leave it at that and move on, but before I move on, I actually do need to talk a little bit about their games because, and I feel fucking dirty for this, I had to acquire some. I used my, little Nintendo token things as if that would make it better. It doesn't, but I am glad I did because holy shit, it's worse than I thought. These games, they're barely products. The slot machine one actually disables your Joy-Cons. It's barely functional with a touchscreen, but if you're playing it docked, like I was when I tried to get footage of it, it doesn't just disable the controllers, it switches them off. I thought my batteries had died. Beat them all is one level, repeated. It took me a couple goes round before I realised that the one enemy model was all placed in the same positions, as were the weapons, and the level details were the same. It's one fucking level, masquerading as multiple. Dinos and ghosts we've already used as B-roll footage. It's fucking incomprehensible and it makes me feel motion sick. And then there's that fucking zombie apocalypse game. Utterly fucking disgusting. Way worse than screenshots could ever convey. If you shoot a zombie, the weapon it threw at you disappears along with it, but the damage is still done because it's still there. And that's the least of the things wrong with it. Holy shit, Pix Arts might be the actual fucking worst! The Switch also has an abundance of mockbuster-style games, at least as far as naming conventions go. In the film world, a mockbuster is a movie cheaply produced to look like a popular film with a name just legally distinct enough to not infringe on copyright. The Asylum is a notorious producer of mockbusters with such films as Transmorphers, Snakes on a Train, The Da Vinci Treasure, AVH, Alien vs. Hunter, Sunday School Musical, 18-Year-Old Virgin, how's that a premise? Paranormal Entity, The Terminators, Almighty Thor, Abraham Lincoln vs. Zombies, Atlantic Rim, Android Cop, Battle Star Wars, and Independence Day. Okay, I got to admire the audacity on that last one. You occasionally get games that try to pull the same stunt with varying degrees of cheekiness, and on Switch you'll find a few games named in such a way as to trick unassuming buyers. Super Met Boy, for example, or Roblox. They don't even visually resemble what their name suggests, but given how cheap and asset-y they are, the naming is decidedly cynical in motivation. Recently, one perfect storm of shoveled shite made the news when a wisely anonymous scam artist dribbled The Last Hope Dead Zone Survival onto the European eShop. Thanks to some truly audacious storefront artwork, Games Media quickly picked up on this game and reported on it as a shameless rip-off of Naughty Dog's The Last of Us. The actual product was even worse than a rip-off, however, because despite the fact it featured a girl whose character model could barely even claim to be legally distinct from The Last of Us's Ellie, the game itself is nothing but a bargain basement zombie shooter asset flip that takes about half an hour to beat if you don't count the amount of times the game becomes unwinnable because stamina literally never regenerates and you have such limited ammo that if you spend it shooting all but the most essential of zombies, you'll be unable to keep them off the little girl that follows about 20 fucking foot behind you at a casual jog and cowers immobile if a zombie gets within 2 fucking meters of the twat. This thing isn't a rip-off of The Last of Us. It's somehow even more fraudulent than that. It's a rip-off of a rip-off. Such an utter void of creativity it couldn't even be bothered to copy Naughty Dog. It just used a single piece of artwork to pretend it did. And when you're such a lazy piece of shit that even plagiarism is too much like hard work, I wonder how you're even still alive, since it's hard to believe you put the effort into breathing on your own. The Switch is utterly littered with 2-bit garbage designed purely to exploit the most gullible of customers: Candy Match Kiddies, Space Invasion, The Legend of Zelda, Tears of the Kingdom, just a ridiculous amount of shovelware in which the eShop's fucking drowning. It's become passé to make fun of the Nintendo seal of quality. In fact, it became a well-worn joke during the height of the Wii's success, beset as that system was by shovelware that glommed onto its mainstream success in a desperate bid to swindle all those millions of prospective buyers who didn't know very much about video games. But Nintendo at one time did indeed put its seal of quality on every game published for its consoles, verifying that even if the games weren't all good, in fact the NES was full of hot garbage, they were at least credibly made and not pieced together Frankenstein-like from pre-made asset packs that in some cases haven't even been renamed before getting uploaded to the shop. It's impossible to reconcile the attitude behind the seal of quality and Nintendo's current attitude of who fucking cares. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if younger generations thought the seal of quality thing was a made-up meme rather than a genuine historical point. It's rather sad, really. Despite being as greedy as any other corporation, Nintendo does still focus on being a maker and seller of games rather than shitty microtransaction-laden services. No, it just farms its IP out for that shit. But the standards it upholds for the products it produces are a million miles above the ones it has for any other fucker turning a quick buck on the Switch. They're just rolling over and letting the eShop be swarmed to such a degree that you got one fucking tool selling dozens of fucking clocks. Now obviously we've talked about asset flips and similar trash on this show since practically the very beginning. It's not new. Steam is still littered with this stuff, and it's not like other consoles are free of it. In fact, I need to talk about the weird running and jumping games that have infested console stores, and of course scumbags like Gilson B. Pontus operate seemingly with PlayStation's blessing. But the Switch, compared to the PlayStation and Xbox platforms, appears to be particularly infested, and it's an especially aggravating problem because of one major issue. The fact that Nintendo eShop is, even at the best of times, fucking shit. The eShop is a bad storefront. Like a really fucking bad storefront. It's poorly laid out with clunky menus and only rudimentary filtering options. Developers don't get their own pages, you don't get user reviews or similar curation. The new releases page just squirts out game after game, one after the other, and once a title has been pushed down far enough, it practically disappears from view. When a load of wank like Zombie Hunter D-Day appears on the store, it's given just as much positioning and prominence as a game like, say, Dead Cells. At least Dead Cells gets some promotion though. Unless it's lucky enough to be featured on the eShop's, well, featured section, it's only got hours at most after launch before it's potentially buried under a sea of detritus. This naturally screws over indie games the most, since unless they're already a big deal with a lot of press, they likely ain't getting anywhere near the featured section. For a game like Blasphemous appearing in the recent releases tab, it's like placing a bottle of vintage wine on the same shelf as several vials of cold semen. The only way a game gets another shot at notability once it's pushed out of recent releases is getting seen in the Great Deals section by offering a discount. The only problem there is the shovelware it's competing with is perpetually on sale, and the section itself has, for whatever reason, been front-loaded with LEGO games for what feels like fucking years now. Seriously, every time I look in the discounted section, the first pages are literally always swamped with LEGO games. It's fucking weird. So yeah, Visibility is hard on the eShop. It's poorly laid out, and the way in which its releases page has been arranged ensures that every game, whether it's a well-made title or a shitty little asset flip, is given an equal amount of attention. But it's worse than that, because compounding all these issues is the fact that, as well as being badly designed, the eShop runs badly too. It's actually fucking stunning to consider the eShop is on a system that was released in the last 10 years, because it's barely developed from the fucking days of the DS. Pressing any given button will see you waiting several seconds for anything to happen, whether you've clicked on a game or just attempted to scroll up and down a menu. The lag is utterly atrocious and has never seen improvement since the console released in 2017. In fact, I sometimes wonder if it hasn't gotten fucking worse. Navigating the eShop is a painful affair as pages frequently hang up, take forever to load, and sometimes only half appear, with a bunch of unloaded thumbnails and missing details. Then there's just a little examples of dumbassery, like if you've been browsing the deals section and decide to buy a game, the eShop will lose track of where you were browsing and reload the entire section again. If you've been scrolling deep into the discount section, you'll have lost your place if you actually buy anything and either deal with the sluggish laggy scroll back to where you were, or, as will be more likely, you'll just not fucking bother. The quote-unquote fix that I discovered for this is to add what you want to buy to your wish list and then come back to it. But you shouldn't fucking have to do that. A skin-crawlingly awkward experience, the eShop is quite genuinely unpleasant to navigate, and I hate trying to find anything on there because it'll just be an exercise in getting fucking annoyed. When you combine the already poor discoverability with the fact that merely browsing is a pain in the perineum, you have a recipe that nobody who actually cares about games they're making will find very tasty. And Nintendo has done nothing. Nothing to redesign the crappy layout, nothing to fix the crappy performance, nothing to stop crappy games shoving good ones out the spotlight. In fact, the only thing Nintendo did to address any sort of eShop problem was do something that many developers found hurt them more than helped.
Aren't you gonna thank me?
For what?
They stopped games being able to go on sale for prices so cheap they were literally under $1. While at first glance it seems like a good idea to stop games being sold for 30 cents, since clearly such games must be low-grade asset flips, it was actually revealed by several developers of real games that these absurdly deep discounts genuinely helped to make some money and drove a large amount of sales. Selling a game for pennies might not sound like a wise fiscal move, but if doing so gets thousands of people to buy a game they would otherwise never have bought, well, they're literally making a ton of money that was otherwise never going to be theirs. Severely deep discounts were very seriously helping small developers out, so of course it's the one practice Nintendo put a stop to.
Meanwhile,
The digital clocks, the pornless porn games, the asset flips, the suspiciously named rip-offs, the fraudsters so fraudulent they're pretending to be plagiarists because it's better than what they are, all that fucking putridity continues to thrive unabated, and will continue to do so, because people have been quite rightly complaining about it for years, and Nintendo has done nothing about it. Actually, no. If it had done nothing, small developers could still enjoy vast sales spikes thanks to vast discounts. Thanks for literally worse than nothing, Nintendo. Your seal of quality once more speaks for itself.
It's the extra poo that makes all the difference.
Commander Sterling. Whoa!
And you reckon if we change the frame rate on the video, this will show up, this piece of nonsense?
I mean, 60's a bit better than 30. But unless you want to sit there and count how many times it does a thing in a second, then I guess we're all just going to have to struggle.
Yeah, cost me 30 quid at Tesco, so I thought I might as well get some fucking work use out of it. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed today's video, as we, in my opinion, continue a streak of fucking high quality episodes. This one felt very nostalgic for me, talking about asset flips and shovelware. God, it reminds me of the days when I was actually popular. Anyway, very exciting. I tell you what, I would not be surprised if some of the games we've looked at and some of the studios we've talked about, it just wouldn't surprise me if the eShop in general wasn't full of some of the old familiar faces from way back when, the usual suspects, the old villains, as it were, the rogues gallery of Steam Greenlight and whatnot. Who knows? All I know is the eShop is fucking shit. And that will do. And I didn't even make a joke about Tears of the Kingdom being rubbish on the eShop more than once. Thank God for me.